My husband's 3-week silent treatment backfired so badly he came home one day and I wasn't there. My husband Greg and I were married for 14 years. He had one move whenever he didn't get his way. Silence. Not the kind where someone needs space to cool down. The kind designed to make you feel like you don't exist. It started 6 months into the marriage. I bought a couch without asking him first. He didn't speak to me for 4 days. I returned the couch the next morning and apologized until my throat was sore. That became the pattern. If I visited my sister without telling him first, 2 days of silence. If I disagreed with how he handled money, 5 days. If I suggested he was wrong about anything at all, he'd go so quiet you'd forget another person lived in the house. And every single time, I'd shrink. I'd cook his favorite meals and leave them on the table like offerings. I'd text him paragraphs of apologies he never responded to. I'd sit on the edge of the bed at night, whispering sorry to a man pretending to be asleep. He'd eventually come back to life when he decided I'd suffered enough, and I'd feel grateful. Grateful that my own husband was speaking to me again. That went on for 14 years. Then 3 weeks ago, I told him I wanted to go back to school. I'd been looking at nursing programs. I showed him the tuition, the schedule, how I'd still handle everything at home. He stared at the laptop screen and said, "That's not realistic." I said, "I'd already spoken to an admissions counselor." He closed the laptop. "We're not spending money on that." I said, "It was financial aid and a small loan." I said no. I told him this mattered to me. He walked out of the room, and just like that, the house went dead. Day 1, I cried in the bathroom. Day 2, I almost drove to the store to buy ingredients for his favorite lasagna. I got my keys. I stood at the front door, and for the first time in 14 years, I asked myself something. Why am I about to cook a 4-hour meal for a man who won't look at me because I want to go to school? I put the keys down. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the laptop he'd closed. Day 3, he walked through the living room without glancing at me. I was filling out the application. I didn't look up. Day 4, I called my sister for the first time in months. She asked why I sounded different. I said I didn't know yet. Day 5, I submitted the application. My hands were shaking, but I hit send. Day 6, I started walking in the mornings, then 2 miles, then 3. I came home with color in my cheeks and energy I hadn't felt in years. Greg noticed. He looked confused. Day 7, I rearranged the living room, moved his recliner out of the center, and put the reading chair by the window where the light comes in. He stared at it when he came downstairs. I was already reading. Day 8, I stopped cooking his meals. I made food for myself and the kids. His plate wasn't on the table. He opened the fridge and stood there for a long time. Day 9, I dug out old photo albums from before the marriage. I barely recognized the woman in them. She was laughing. She looked free. I decided I wanted to meet her again. Day 10, something broke open inside me. The silence wasn't a punishment anymore. It was the first honest space I'd had in 14 years. No one was monitoring my words. No one was grading my opinions. No one was deciding whether I deserved a response. I could breathe. Days 11 through 15, I painted the bedroom a color I loved without asking. I enrolled the kids in swim lessons I'd wanted for months. I had coffee with a neighbor I'd been too anxious to befriend. I opened a bank account in my name. Greg started hovering. He'd stand in doorways watching me. He was waiting for me to break. Day 16, the acceptance letter came. I got in. I sat in my car in the driveway and sobbed. Not from sadness, from the realization that I almost never applied because a man who wouldn't even speak to me told me no. Day 18, Greg finally spoke. He walked into the kitchen and said, "So this is how it's going to be." I looked at him. "You haven't spoken to me in 18 days. I've enrolled in nursing school, opened my own bank account, repainted the bedroom, and made more decisions in 3 weeks than I made in 14 years. So yes, this is how it's going to be." He went pale. I said, "Every time I had a thought you didn't like, you erased me. You made me feel like I needed your permission to exist. And I spent 14 years believing that." I said, "You can be part of this family as a partner, or you can keep standing in doorways waiting for a woman who doesn't exist anymore." Last Tuesday, I walked into my first class, sat in the front row, and opened a notebook. And the woman holding that pen was someone my husband of 14 years had never met.